Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Trading the Close. My name is Gareth Soloway. As always, it is a pleasure to be here with you guys and try to walk through the key insights of the day, the key action of the day. So, first and foremost, what I want to do is cover what the S&P did today. Then we're going to get into a couple other things. A little bit different today. We don't have our studio working properly, so we're kind of making it work here, and I'm able to do this beautifully behind my screens where I do all my interviews and other shows as well. All right, so again, let's get right into the action here. Let's get right into what the S&P is doing today. So as we take a look here at the SPY, this is the intraday 10-minute chart. We opened a little bit higher today. We saw a small sell-off back to the flat line, sideways chop, and then ultimately a rollover and then a recovery here late in the day. When all is said and done, where the markets are going to be closing in about 3 minutes, what do we have here? We have a market that is slightly negative on the S&P 500. One thing I want to draw your attention to is the daily chart. Look at the volume right here. All right, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it shows 25.4 million shares traded on the S&P 500 or the SPY tracking ETF. That is insanely light. Now, today, again, folks, this is what we call a hangover day. And a hangover day is after a 3-day weekend, especially when the holiday is on a Monday. People relax, they drink a little bit, they have a lot of food with friends and family, and there's usually a much slower Tuesday period after that Monday holiday. So today fits the bill on that. Not much price action in the S&P in particular. Now, if we look at the NASDAQ chart as we flip over here, we can see that the NASDAQ daily, it is fractionally higher on the day. I was doing a little bit of channel drawing here just to kind of see where the lines are. Notice how the midpoint of this channel here is right where we're hugging right in this range. So it does seem like we're kind of right into a little bit of minor resistance on the NASDAQ 100. Today's upside is being led by Nvidia. Nvidia, again, what an amazing mover here. If we flip over to that chart, Nvidia is trading up at 1136, up 6.75 percentage points. Now, again, folks, absolutely amazing move here on Nvidia. And really, when it comes down to it, right, the key here is understanding that this is a momentum trade. There was news that Elon Musk is, raising X amount of dollars for chips, and that is helping Nvidia. As again, Nvidia is still the king of the castle when it comes to AI, even with the China news. Now, China news, you could say, okay, this was kind of bearish for the chip sector because they raised something like $40 to $60 billion to create their own AI chips, which eventually I think they'll flood the market with. But nonetheless, it is what it is, and the markets are continuing to hold steady. I want to show you something that's pretty wild here, guys. So if we flip back to my charts, I want to show you this. Nvidia, again, is the top gainer here in the NASDAQ 100, up 6.72% or $71.55. Look at the NASDAQ here. The NASDAQ is up 7 points or 7.75 points. Nvidia alone, look at how many points Nvidia is adding to the NASDAQ. It's adding 91.4 points. So what this means is that if Nvidia was just flat on the day, the NASDAQ 100 would be down approximately 84 points on the day. So think about that. Nvidia by itself is pushing up the NASDAQ 100 by 91.4 points. That's the equivalent, again, with the NASDAQ 100 only up 7 points on the day, as it would be down 84 approximately if the Nvidia was flat on the day. If we look at the S&P 500, much the same. Look at this, guys. This is even more remarkable. Take a look at this. The S&P 500 is down 9 points currently, 9.5 points. Nvidia is adding 21 points to the S&P 500 today. All right, now the kicker there is, think about this. That means that if you subtracted 21 points, the S&P would be down over 30 points on the day if it was not for Nvidia. And by the way, look at what's pulling up the index here. You have Amazon, you have AMD, you have Google. This one here's. So basically what this is telling us is that the mega caps are still leading this market, and they are controlling the narrative. They are controlling and giving us these new all-time highs on the NASDAQ. Well, really, we're not at new all-time highs, but we're pretty darn close, and we have hit them recently. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of go through that. I think that's a little bit of importance there to kind of grasp how much of an impact Nvidia has on the overall markets. I also think it's important to recognize that Nvidia now is a $2.8 trillion company. We basically have Apple just above 2.9 trillion, and Microsoft is just above 3 trillion. So we have Nvidia, which is closing in very, very quickly to being the most valuable company by market cap in the world, essentially in the US markets, but it is in the world as well. Okay, so what was moving today, guys? Obviously, we looked at Nvidia today. I did want to bring up the First Solar chart. I did touch base on this today in the game plan. And if we look at First Solar, I continue to think you're probably pretty close to a top on this on First Solar in the near term. We can see we're right at the high end of this move. Last week was an amazing run up on First Solar, but again, nice little channel there. Now let's take a look at the US dollar today, then we'll go into Bitcoin, we'll go into gold real quick. But basically the dollar was flat on the day. You could see again, we had this breakout of this wedge pattern. So again, the wedge pattern came to a head here and price broke out. We then saw a classic retrace to the scene of the crime. We then popped up and we kind of came back down here. Today on the daily chart, this is the daily candle. It's flat to positive, so not much movement there on the current candle. Going to the 10-year yield. Remember, the 10-year yield was retracing into the scene of the crime. I think we can say officially that this now has retraced into the scene of the crime. To me, this makes me more bearish on yields. It's a good move up, but again, we are back in after breaking down. We've come back in to this level right here. I would expect in general a move back to the downside. I'll draw it in right here. I would expect a move to be rejected. Now, what could be the catalyst to this? Well, we have GDP numbers on Thursday and then the PCE data on Friday, as well as some interesting earnings. Remember, we have Dell this week. We have CRM, which is Salesforce, and a few other big names reporting this week, especially in the AI narrative kind of space. And that'll be something to watch. All right, taking a look at gold real quick. Gold, small bounce. Now, the biggest concern for gold bulls is that we're below this upsloping trend line here. So again, we have a downward move below that line. We're now consolidating in the underbelly of this trend line, and that ultimately could be bearish. That could yield a move to the downside support right here at around 2280. All right, now if we close back above that line, that gives us the potential to retest this high up here. But right now, even though we've seen a little upside in gold recently, to me, this is not bullish yet because we still remain below, and this could be consolidating in a bearish pattern. Silver having a nice little update today. It's close to retesting its big high pivot. The one thing I would just point out on silver, folks, is if we go to our monthly chart on silver, take a look at where silver ran into resistance. So a lot of people were like, oh, silver broke out above 30, but why did it stop at 32.50, right? Why did we break above these highs here? Okay, but then stall out right there. Well, this tells us the tale. This high pivot connected right through this high. In fact, you could see a little bit of a test right here as well. So these two highs, and that's where it stalled. So this 32.50 level is a big level on silver. If it can break through that, our next resistance on silver would be right here at the 35 level. So you can see these little high pivot area right here. That would be resistance, okay? So that's something to keep an eye on. On the underbelly, in terms of a bigger sell-off, if silver really started to sell off, there's a very key trend line here from the lows of 2020 to the lows of 2022 to the low of 2023. And if we pulled back into that, this would be like max downside that I see, at least $24 on the bigger time frame would be major technical support. All right, by the way, in the near term, I'm not really expecting a retrace to 24. I still think the $30 level, maybe 29 and change, is probably your short-term downside max. And we kind of kissed that just the other day as we discussed in the game plan this morning. Next up, taking a look quickly at oil. Oil having a strong move to the upside here. So just a couple things we can see again. We had a good move up on oil. We're now back above $80. You can see there's a little pivot high here at 80. That's minor resistance. I'm still expecting a move up to about 81.75 to 82, right up in this range. All right, once we get there, I would contemplate a short for myself on oil, as I still think the bigger macro picture is a consumer that is slowing, and then ultimately, eventually, we roll over significantly in oil. Bitcoin real quick. Let's take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin still holding the downward sloping channel above that line. This continues to be a mild breakout. I would consider it bullish, but not overly bullish, as we still haven't confirmed above this level yet, confirmed the breakout. But either way, as long as we stay above, the factors a line for potential further upside to retest 74,000 and then potentially even 80,000. All right, part of the narrative with Bitcoin, though, is that for it to go higher, you're going to have to see the stock market continue to go up. Again, you're seeing Nvidia go up and the stock market flat, but the stock market, again, is not participating as much as you would expect with Nvidia surging. We discussed that earlier as well. All right. So that's really the big levels that I've seen today, folks, as we kind of come to the end here on trading the close. I think we have to just watch again today. Very light volume. Markets are looking forward to that economic data later this week, as well as Dell earnings, CRM earnings, and some of these other companies that are semi-big, big cap, large cap companies. But really the PCE data on Friday will be the big one. That's where I would expect a big move in the dollar. I would expect a big move in yields, and I would expect a big move in gold, silver, and even Bitcoin and the stock market as well. You guys, again, it's always a pleasure to give you guys these updates. Thank you for tuning into this kind of varied, abbreviated version of Trading the Close. We should be back in the studio tomorrow for Trading the Close, but thank you again, guys, for coming out, and I wish you all the best. You guys take care.